I am resident of Collinwood, Jewel Saints, joined by Melissa Gallagher, Butch Rosenbalm, Patrick McCray. We're here to discuss the movie House of Dark Shadows, starring Jonathan Frid, Joan Bennett, Catherine Lee Scott. Every character from this show, well, every cast member from the show pretty much is here in this movie. Melissa, what did you think of House of Dark Shadows?
Well, like all y'all, I love Dark Shadows. They're like family members to me. It's not a research project. It's not something, I have friends that love Dark Shadows. It's not something that you can just like watch once or twice, like you've pointed out, Joel and Patrick and Butch many times. You got to get to know these folks. And when you do, they're like family. So I have mixed feelings about this, being a fan of the show and loving it so much. I feel like, we were just talking before we came on about drive-ins, and all the drive-ins in our communities. And this is a great drive-in movie. This is like a Halloween movie, okay? And I think that you have to take this movie, if you're a Dark Shadows television show fan, as almost, you have to take it at face value for what it is. Because it's not, it's almost like a parallel dimension. It's all the people we love, all our beloved people, all the people we've gotten to know that we cherish. But it's a little different. It's like a parallel dimension. You have to take it at face value and not worry about character development. There's not going to be a lot of character development in this because, Barnabas gets right to biting Carolyn. Julia gets right away to falling in love with Barnabas. That relationship doesn't build over time. Maggie gets locked in a room just like Vicky did right away at the beginning. Stokes is like a Westchester Van Helsing right away. So you can't really worry, I don't think, about character development or look at it quite like the show. This is a fun drive-in movie, kind of a Halloween movie, that it's like, oh, my people, okay. And see, I loved it, but yet I knew what was missing. You know what I mean? So very mixed feelings. Very mixed.
Patrick?
I love the scene where David comes in at the dinner and he's seen Carolyn. And Louis Edmonds is so marvelous in it. It's for me the best thing in the movie, that he goes from being Roger in the first episode of the series, just like, David, what the hell are you doing? Get out of here. You're just, making a sham out of everyone's life. To being this heartbroken father and either thinking his son has seen something terrible, or worse, his son hasn't and is just profoundly mentally ill. But all it does is bring more love out in his heart.
Yeah.
And I love that scene.
It's a beautiful scene.
Butch, what did you think?
Well, in the parlance of Rocky Horror Picture Show, I'm the virgin slut of this group. I'd never seen this before until 2 days ago. I mean, I knew it existed. What's funny is I tried to watch it years ago, and the power went out.
Oh, no.
Came on again, and at the time I had a DVR, and the DVR crashed and lost it. And I was like, damn, I'm just not supposed to watch this. So apparently I'm supposed to wait and watch it and then talk about it with you guys. like Melissa said, I know enough about Dark Shadows that I knew this was kind of, I don't know how many episodes condensed, and it had a real late Hammer or Kolchak or Count Yorga feel to it. And I mean, in a complimentary sense, because I love all three of those things. And it was not what I expected, because I knew the show nowhere near as much as you folk, and I was like, okay, well, wow, things are moving. typical soap opera where, the character has a problem and they talk about it. They talk about, how they do that on most soap operas. No, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, yeah. And it, the being a movie, it had a freedom that the show didn't have to show certain things. And I thought go into maybe areas they couldn't on TV. So if you wanted I hate to say more adult take, but a little more non-TV take, let's say. Yeah, this was the thing for you to watch. And yeah, Patrick talking about the father is just like, yeah, that was, I could feel, I mean, I'm a grandfather who married in, so I didn't raise kids. I just came into grandkids, and it's like,
Aw.
I could feel that,
Aw.
that, oh my God, has my grandchild seen this, or are they going crazy? And oh my God, it's even worse than I think.
Yeah, it's really gripping, this movie. It's pure fun too, and I like the fact that, because this is the first of 3 Dark Shadows movies. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Dark Shadows as a series or as a movie, the series does not connect to the movie, and the movie does not. None of the movies connect to the series. They're not canon to them.
Right.
And I would say the film that sort of more teases trying to be canon is more the 2012 movie, because before the trailer, years before not years, a couple months before the trailer, they had talked about the 2012 movie, and they had said this movie is set at the tail end of the series. And I remember looking at Julie and going, why?
Yeah.
But so it's really, this movie is not set on anything. It's its own thing, but it is borrowing a storyline from the television series. It's borrowing the Maggie Evans storyline, where Maggie's Josette is the reincarnation of Josette. And like you've all talked about, it's very fast paced. But Patrick had talked about one of his favorite moments. Melissa, what's yours?
Well, speaking of Patrick, I love the way that in the series, the character of Maggie Evans doesn't. Well, she likes Barnabas as an acquaintance, I guess. She kind of thinks he's cool, but she's in love with Joe Haskell. In this, she falls in love. Catherine Lee Scott's Maggie falls in love with Barnabas Collins. And my favorite scene is when, they're in that wonderland of that outdoor scenery where they're in the fall and he's outside for the first time, and Catherine Lee Scott's acting and her face, she projects like such a warmth, like the sunshine on her face and the warmth that she has for Barnabas. Kind of like how I feel about Patrick, and his beautiful heart and his beautiful self. But anyway, she has such a warmth. I just adore him. Such a warmth in her face when she looks up at Barnabas, and she just projects that so well. And I love watching Maggie, for a change, actually be really into Barnabas. And I think it's really cool to see that, because we've never seen that before. So I love that.
Patrick?
The question is, what's my favorite scene?
Yes.
Oh, I think it's where it's the staircase scene where Stokes comes in. He's there to kind of suss out Barnabas, and there he is on the staircase. And everyone sort of focuses on Barnabas and the pain that he's kind of withholding and all of that. And I can't, as always, take my eyes off there, David. And because he is for such mass, the light is pulled in, including my vision, and that he's just there, and you can tell he's like, I know you did this somehow. I know you pulled this off somehow. You can figure it out. That is a scene that we never got in the series, where Stokes is brought in a little earlier and is well aware of what's going on, and that
Cool.
Barnabas, who in this movie is a really just thoroughly unpleasant bully, and that Stokes is sort of a hero that we're robbed of, I think, but we see him in that moment. And because Stokes kind of sees what he's been doing to Julia, and it really doesn't take a Professor Stokes to figure out that come on, guys, this is what this guy's only seen at night, and
Something's
so
up.
on, and so that is a glimpse for me of where the movie could have and should have gone. And we don't get that in the movie, but we do get that in that one scene. And it's the sort of thing where it's a Sam Loomis moment, and it's where Loomis has to, for some reason, be polite to Michael Myers, but he just knows that something really bad is happening with this guy, and it portends a showdown we never really get. On the other hand, it sets up the size of Barnabas's power and ruthlessness when we then see Stokes turned later in the film, and that is one of the scariest moments in the movie, and it's also kind of a heartbreaking moment also, because it really speaks of a universe that is betraying all of these people, that anything they had that was a tie to sanity and to social order and to the power of the intellect and the power of science, just the power of goodness, it's all kind of gone. And that's sort of the realm that we live in, and that it's going to be up to Willie Loomis and Roger Davis to save the day. And when it's up to Willie Loomis and Roger Davis to save the day, I mean, Roger's a good guy. Willie, I'm not so sure about. And that really speaks of the human condition, though. I mean, we are Maggies in the universe, really outgunned, and we eventually have to learn that maybe it's just up to Willie Loomis and Roger Davis to save our day, and that gets us to look at danger and conflict and assumptions about class and things like that very differently. And I appreciate it for that, because there's not even an Obi-Wan to whisper in the ears, saying turn off the targeting computer and just kind of do your thing. That doesn't even happen. So it makes the heroism of Willie and of Roger Davis even more impressive. And in a way, as fond as I am of Roger, I kind of wish that it had just been left up to Willie completely alone to have to make the choice and deal with this, because there's a real symmetry about that. That Willie is the one who brought this on due to greed, due to the lowest of human emotions, and it's only through going through this with the highest of human emotions and aspirations that this experience brings out of him that he would be able to save it. There is an element of that still in the movie. And I think it was a very powerful thing that, for all I know, maybe Sam and Gordon had intended to do, because it's so close. But, that there was we got to let the traditional matinee idol. And that's true. It's, in the words of James Whale, as I often say, it's part of the ritual. So there's that.
I always thought, tell me what y'all think of this. I always thought Roger Davis was misunderstood, and here's why. I read an interview with him, and we know that he got this later after Dark Shadows. He got his dream. He always wanted to be a Western star. He wanted to be a cowboy star, but he wanted to be like the cowboy. And he did get Alias Smith and Jones later. And I think that, I know it didn't last long, but he did get what he wanted, and I think what he was doing on the show and he was close to Dan, so he was able to get it in the movie too. Is the cowboy always gets the girl. He always has the girl. He's always with the girl, touching the girl, with the girl, and the cowboy always gets the bad guy and always wins the battle. So it's like, I would have loved to have just let Willie have done it, like you said. I agree with that. But I think that Roger was like, I'm the cowboy. I'm going to be a cowboy star. I got to be the one because people are going to look back at this someday at my work. And I really think he wanted to be like a John Wayne, like a legendary cowboy. And I think he was always conscientious of that. And I think he talked to Dan about it and everything. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I'm guessing. But it just seemed like that was going on with Roger Davis. And I think people misunderstood it as him being maybe a little too much. But you know, I don't know, the behind the scenes necessarily. But I think that's what he, at his core, that's what he was going for. And Patrick knows I love Roger. I was showing him all the other night, Roger Davis. And there's a song by Glenn Campbell called Southern Nights. Every time I hear it, I think of Roger. I'm a fan. I mean, I think that he's a cool guy, and but I do agree that Willie probably should have been the one that, you know, he was almost the one, but he probably should have been the final one that did Barnabas in. I do agree.
Somebody should have told Roger Davis, hey, in the 70s, you can't get arrested for being a Western star, let alone making one. And it would have saved him a lot of trouble. It would, I mean, seriously, because there were Western movies made in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't making Westerns weren't making people stars the way they were in the 60s or the prior.
Right.
Because they just weren't hot in the 70s and 80s, and they pretty much were all but killed off in the 70s. Like I said, you couldn't get arrested for being in a Western. And it's weird, that's cool that he wanted to be a cowboy and in a Western movie, but
yeah,
if he would have,
I think that's what he was going for. Yeah.
My take is, if that's the case, he didn't read the tea leaves very well in the theater, because you could clearly see in the 70s things were a changing.
But
sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh.
But, it depends really on the script. Like, maybe he could have, like, I always think as an actor, I always think maybe I can change the culture somehow with a role. You can't really put yourself in a box. Maybe he could have gotten a script that was like the new cowboy of the 70s, like maybe, all kinds of possibilities could have taken place. The cowboy genre could have went in a slightly different direction. I mean, he did have a lot of connections and a lot of control, and with Charlie's Angels and all that. So it's hard to say. I mean, I think people would have accepted cowboy movies had it been the right kind of cowboy movie.
Yeah.
And Roger Davis would know about that. He would have offered people a new direction, but he wasn't allowed to get that new direction out and to explore it and to show it. And I think from what I understand, I think this movie needed a new direction. I think it needed several new directions, very, very upstanding ones.
What's your favorite scene in House of Dark Shadows?
Well, it's kind of funny because I really liked Professor Stokes. He was the Van Helsing. But as odd as it sounds, and this is why Patrick and I are brothers from another mother, it's there towards the end when Roger and Loomis take out Barnabas, and it had a real Kolchak feel to me. This everyman. Van Helsing can show up and take out Dracula, but what happens when Van Helsing dies? And it's not even Quincy and Murray. It's Loomis and Davis. I mean,
Murray. It's from the Odd Couple. It's like Murray the Cop and Speed.
I mean, it's like
that's a cool way to look at it.
I know Patrick would have my back in just about anything, but I don't think he and I are two people you want to call to go kill a vampire. It's like, okay, it would probably turn into something like Fearless Vampire Killers or Captain Kronos, where they're like trying to figure out how to kill the vampire.
He probably would be psychologically manipulated to not hurt anybody. I think you guys could do it. You'd find a way.
Vampire McCray and Rosenbaum, vampire killers.
Got it up
That's
here.
a tagline in itself, right there.
Oh, I'd watch that series in a heartbeat.
Hollywood needs the book, and I'm watching it. Guys.
Oh, we need that. We need that. We're begging for it.
But I guess my biggest issue with the movie is, and don't get me wrong, I love Roger Davis, but there needed to be a scene where, because you can clearly see Barnabas is putting the Mac on Catherine Lee Scott's character at the party in front of freaking Roger Davis.
Yeah.
And he doesn't
in his Nathan Forbes outfit. Yeah.
He doesn't say shit. It's like you at least need a moment where Roger Davis is like, excuse me. Like he doesn't have to he doesn't have to be like punching him, but a look, a dirty look, anything would have did, and they don't do it for him.
I think he just picks up the drink, like distracts her with the drink,
Yeah,
but most guys would probably want to punch him. Yeah.
It's just like you need him to be a little more assertive as your protagonist. And I get what they're going for. They want the least likely person to be the hero, like you guys have sort of touched on. I get that from this movie. I've always got it ever since I watched it, because that's what Kolchak was too. He was the least likely hero, and you do get that in other movies. Don't get me wrong, but here it just one little moment wouldn't have hurt Roger Davis. It would have helped it. Don't get me wrong. He has moments where he's the one that sees Daphne. He's driving up and he says, Daphne. He spots Daphne, but that happens at the beginning of the movie, and it's been so long ago since that happened in the movie.
Yeah,
it's sort of an afterthought, especially when Carolyn's death hits, because my favorite scene is the funeral sequence, because Jerry Lacey, holy shit, that eulogy is like, damn.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah,
I sort of do wish, if they had changed one thing, instead of Willie Loomis going to Stokes, he secretly goes to Jerry Lacey for confession and tells him about Barnabas, and Jerry Lacey's your hero, Reverend Trask.
Yeah.
But what do you guys think? What's something you might have changed about this movie, Melissa?
I'd have changed. Well, that I think the movie does have a certain integrity to it. I love the camera work and everything. The camera work, with Barnabas's cane, how it zooms in, and the point of view. I love it. The music, our beloved soundtrack, that we always hear. But to me, the movie had a certain integrity. And then at the end, the finale, when it was almost like Edgar Allan Poe, like with purple lights and then cobwebs coming up through the staircase and branches, and it was like what? Like it went from like, I don't know, it had like a certain flow and integrity to it, and then that ending was very Halloween, over the top. It didn't match, even though I loved it, because like I love Haunted Mansion, love Halloween, who doesn't? Part of me loved it, but part of me was like, wait a minute, this doesn't, there's no way in hell Barnabas would have his wedding area location to his new Josette would never have had, all that going on. And I know it's for effect, it's for the Halloween thing, but that was like, wait a minute, this doesn't go with the rest of it. It chopped up the flow a little bit to me, being so like a carnival at the end there. Even though I like that stuff.
Patrick, what do you think? Sorry.
I got a lot to say. Going back, 5 or 6 minutes ago, I think the fastest way that Jeff Clark could have distracted Barnabas would have been with have Mrs. Johnson just wave a bottle of Geritol and the new copy of Muscle and Fitness at him, and that would have been it. I think if there's any reason why Roger Davis is not doing more, maybe is because he's this craggy 44-year-old Canadian. I mean, because ultimately that's kind of the level of reality that you bring to the movie. I don't, especially at that time, you didn't have a 78-year-old Leonardo DiCaprio dating a 12-year-old or whatever's going on in Hollywood nowadays. I hear rumors. And I mean, it wasn't quite that world yet. In fact, it was the youth scene was really beginning to take off. So I can understand partially why he didn't, sort of pursue that. So you got that angle. But beyond that, what would I have changed with the movie? Jewel, that's a big issue with me, and I don't know if that's box text we want to unlock at this point. I do have some things to say about the movie, but I don't know if that's a place we want to go quite yet. I will say, in answer to your question, I can answer it in 2 words: a lot. There's a lot I would change about this movie.
I hear you. Butch?
Well, I have one question for you folks that I needed cleared up. In Dark Shadows, can Barnabas turn into a bat like that happens in an ending, or is that just the ending?
Mm-hmm.
No,
he's done it.
Okay. The one thing I would change is the editing. Because there's parts of this that I feel are at times really slow pace, and I mean I understand that. Again, we're coming from a I don't think that's me. You're coming from a soap opera background, but there's points that's just like, oh my god. Can we hurry up and get to the important part? And then when it got there, it was good. It's just, I just feel like the pacing for me anyway was off through a lot of the extraneous parts.
Butch, that's the most faithful part to Dark Shadows this movie shows.
I know. I've seen enough to know that.
Just, pacing, yeah.
At times, it's like, what I was watching it on kept the video kept getting out of sync with the audio, and I'd have to pause it.
Yeah.
Then and it would catch up, and it was just like, oh.
But it is a movie. It is leisurely in its pacing, or we might say European in its pacing. Also, all the euphemisms we use for boring. It is a movie where if you have to step away and age 30 years, you can do that and come back, and not a lot always has happened, or too much has happened. If you look at the beginning of the movie, there's this compression of time goes on, where if you look at it objectively, when suddenly there's that dinner with the, cheesy Pizza Hut, tablecloths and candles and all of that, it's embarrassing. That it's like, well, wait, hold on, just 10 minutes ago, and he's already, but how many days is it the same? How much? What just happened? So there's this is a movie made by someone who had picked up certain great lessons about making movies, about inventive ways to use the camera and other things like that. And at the same time, it is a movie made by a network executive who directed a handful of half-hour soap operas, and then, because the toy box was his, said, and now I shall be a director. And for all of the people who like to sit around and say, oh, those darn intellectuals, they think they can go to film school and they know how to make a movie. Well, you do learn how to make a movie when you go to film school. This is not Hal Roach Studios where we're just kind of throwing it together. I mean, you expect to see like Willie and Stokes and Julia on a piece of cardboard on a hill, just going down as fast as they can, which, yeah, in the Tim Burton movie, that's exactly what Julia did. She went down as fast as she could. But all seriousness aside,
Wow.
all seriousness aside, if you can swallow that, then I guess you can swallow the rest of the movie. But yeah, I mean, we have to be honest. This is also a medium where Jack Hill is working, and where you do have people who are kind of outsiders, who are who do intrinsically know how to pick up a camera and where to aim it and stuff like that.
Beautiful.
I mean,
the way it's beautiful camera work. Yeah.
Yeah. If you, I mean, look at the movies of Russ Meyer. I mean, Russ Meyer is a man who just intrinsically knew how to make a movie. And this was a case, this was one of those cases, I think, of Dan Curtis's ego running away from him. And God bless him. He's a great guy and all that. We all agree. But if I had been in charge of that franchise, I would have gotten out of my own way. And I would have found the best movie director I could in New York and said, I want you to make a great movie, and I'm going to hang around and watch everything that you do. So maybe in the second or third film, I'm going to blow the doors off the joint.
Yeah.
But it kind of sometimes feels like someone who watches somebody play the piano a bunch and then says, step aside, I'll show you how it's done. And at first you're sort of like, oh, that's sort of dissonant, that's sort of modern, and then after a while it's just kind of like this discordant mess that occasionally manages to contain parts of a melody that's great, but you never know if it's by accident or and I know that's a very
chords
unpopular opinion in the world of Dark Shadows. But that's he was not Dan Curtis of the Winds of War yet. And not that he had to be, but I really wonder what this movie would have been like if it had even been directed by Leela or Henry Kaplan or somebody like that. I appreciate his desire to be a movie director, but also, and this is my refrain about the movie. I'll come back to it. There is what was fun for Dan Curtis, and God knows he'd earned it. Or what was good for Dark Shadows, and what was ultimately then good for the audience. And I think those are three separate things.
I'm not so sure they were trying to make this like a Gone with the Wind, though, even though it deserved that because it was Dark Shadows. I think they just want to make it a fun drive-in movie, like a Halloween thing.
Sure, and and there had been a lot of, I mean, the fun drive-in movie was at its apex at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Count Yorga, like Butch brought up. This is like another version of Count Yorga, which I love those. But.
Yeah, for me, when I watch a fun drive-in movie, that is not for me code for it can have rough edges.
Yeah.
After those drive-in, my God, 2 years before we had Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
true.
An incredibly polished.
It's beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing.
Polished, well-made movie. And so just because you're on a budget and just because you were dealing with kind of lurid subject matter, and just because you're making a straightforward movie and not something that's going to be, studied in cahiers de cinema, doesn't mean that it has to be, also kind of rough on the edges, and we have to forgive things on it. For me,
okay.
There are shots in it I really like. There are moments that are just terrific, and I wish it's kind of like some great accessories and collars and cuffs, cufflinks and ties
Yeah.
on a suit that maybe is from like off the rack at Penny's.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah,
wonderful things in it,
that's a good analogy. Yeah, I like that.
but it's like maybe we just should have gotten a suit that just fit and worked, and then worried about the accessories and so on,
Yeah.
later.
Do you
I-
think that he may have been like, okay, guys, either it's a case of, like you said, he couldn't get out of his own way, or finally, I get to show all these people what they've been doing wrong.
Oh, both.
And
Oh, yes, I think you're right with both. Yeah. I gotta make them guys.
By the way, it had been the dinner sequence that they have when David comes running in. It had been one full day since Carolyn had died. Because remember, there's a scene between Julia and Stokes where Stokes goes, she will rise in about a day, and a day happens to do dinner. And
Yeah.
You know how much yeast was in it.
Can I talk about Nancy Barrett for a minute?
sure.
All right. Nancy Barrett, I just want to say she never gets the credit for her acting. A lot of acting, sure, there's technicalities, there's blocking, there's your body, you act with your body, everything. But the majority of acting is in the eyes. And Nancy Barrett's eyes, whether it's on the series or in the movies, her eyes tell 1,000 stories. She is such a versatile, incredible actress. She, some actors have like 5 or 6 mugs that they pull out for the camera. Not her. She is a world of expression. I'm watching like her and Burke, like some of the old Dark Shadows, and just the little things she does, with her eyes and her expressions. And she is a master. And I love in this, even when Willie is like walking her back and she's dead, when she's not doesn't have to do a lot, it looks so real and so believable. Her
Right.
death, like even little things. She's an amazing actress. And I love how Don Briscoe's character Todd in this wants her, even though he's mourning. He's wants his Carolyn. He loves his beautiful Carolyn. He wants her. He misses her, and he's just like, take me. And that is like so, as a woman watching, so erotic, sensual, and romantic. He's just falling right into her arms, and I love watching that. And I even love the scene where she says, come to me, and puts her arms out, and he goes to her, and she starts feeding on him. Like she's feeding on him, and the police come up, the sheriff and all that, and they make a noise, and she's like feeding on him and just looks up at the noise and then goes right back to feeding. Like, oh, what was okay, never mind, I'm gonna go back to my bliss.
Girls gotta
eat. A girl's gotta eat. She goes back to her bliss, and Nancy Barrett is amazing. I'm just, you have really good actors on the show. You've got like Catherine's amazing. You got Dennis Patrick as the sheriff. He's a whole different entity. He's like Gary Oldman. He's like, that is not Jason. That is not, Carolyn's father, Paul Stoddard. It is not Paul. He plays a sheriff like some guy, in West. Like he reminds me of like a Western Pennsylvania sheriff. The way he moves his body and talks, and I think David Hennessy he's phenomenal. But I think when he got into puberty, it kind of slowed him down a little bit. But Nancy Barrett is one of those few actors to me, and this is my opinion. She's one of the best actresses I've ever seen, period. Like ever. To me, she's like Meryl Streep. I just watch her. Yeah, I just love her acting. It's incredible. She never gets credit. Never.
Yeah, I will
Never.
not only agree with you, but I will say that this is another way in which I just got to put the cards on the table. The movie makes me really sad. I mean, imagine that you have all this terrific talent, and
Yeah.
there's there's so many actors and so
Yeah.
few parts,
Right.
and being a major motion picture, which I guess is kind of wise, based on just I had 20 million viewers a day.
Mm-hmm. Big.
And most of them young, which meant they were going to be buying tickets for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And to be so talented and so good and think, oh man, we are finally getting a movie.
Yeah.
Can we say James Bond? Can we say Sherlock Holmes? Can we say Tarzan? Can we talk about all of these franchises that existed? And we are already a built-in franchise. Dan, thanks, because this TV thing can't last forever. And isn't it great that we're all going to have careers for many years in the Dark Shadows movies? Because Dark Shadows is a series, and to have all of that talent, and then to look at the script and go, but Dan, this is a beloved character I've been playing for years. People love. I could have the opportunity to be in more movies as Carolyn and keep going and develop the character and maybe eventually like the third movie it's about Carolyn and that's not an unreasonable thing to want or to expect and to realize that Dan, you're killing us off. Yeah, it's gonna be real scary. That's right. But Dan, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is I'm going to become a major horror director and move on and make more horror movies. So does that?
I see your point.
Going to keep
her alive so she has more opportunities with him. Yeah.
Are you going to take us? Are you going to take us with you, Dan? I'm looking at the script for Burn Offerings. I don't see a part for Nancy Barrett in here. Maybe one day I'll get around to it, kid. But you'll be great in that film. That's the part that really it is the talent in the movie. That really and that they're just sort of sometimes they have these wonderful scenes. And it's like, is there any way you could have given us kind of those scenes that are maybe 95% as wonderful, but we leave out the 5% that's the death scene? Can we do that? Maybe I just go into torpor or something until Barnabas is killed, and then I come back, and then I'm in the sequel, because you've basically made 1,000 some odd sequels to episode 1. That's all the series is. It's just a bunch of sequels to episode 1, and that Dan just kind of no, it's gonna be scary instead. Okay, it's gonna be scary.
And then you have somebody like Johnny Depp, who Tim Burton uses in every damn movie and never gives anybody else a chance. But it's like, I see your point that, she could have had her character lived and there was another Dark Shadows movie, it would have been great. But hopefully, a producer or somebody saw her in that and gave her an opportunity, because I know she went on to do a lot more television. But
what if maybe
I agree.
He was trying, and I don't know, throw you fans that went to see it when it came out, throw them a monkey wrench. Oh, he won't kill her, and then you're like,
well, I think that's what he was doing, and
or at least trying to do.
And that's a cool thing, and that's no euphemism. That is a cool thing, and the part of this movie that I have this ongoing dialogue about is that as a movie, which is what it is, it's a fun movie. It is a good, atmospheric, oh my God, they killed them, sort of no holds barred, fun movie. And I don't think it's responsible to also realize that it was a history-making movie. It was a soap opera that was being brought to the wide screen, and that the Dark Shadows fan police had caught up with me. They all ran home from school so they could join the force and hunt me down for saying these things. So I do recognize it as a great movie, and there are times when I say, Patrick, you just, I mean, I hate to say it, but just lay back, it, and that's some sort of, I mean,
let me ask you, with the I'm interested to know, as a director, as a director, because you've had directing experience, you teach acting. I mean, what having to chop it down with a time limit of just being an hour. What is it, an hour and a half? And getting the series in. What's a better way that they could have done that? Do you think?
You want my
Like,
opinion?
how would you have done it? Yeah, I want to. Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I would
Just
concede
curious.
the fact that your core audience knows Dark Shadows.
So you don't
And-
have to introduce all it. Yeah.
No, you don't. And a new audience, basically all they
Mhm.
need to see is, hey, rich guy got turned into a vampire a bunch of years ago,
Yeah.
and now he's back, and he's fighting being a vampire, and he's got these allies, and he is now faced with worse dangers, with Nicholas Blair's, with Angelique's, with things
Yeah.
like that, and that he is your dark vampiric hero. He
Mhm.
is your Blade. He is your, sort of half vampire type hero
Mhm.
who is tempted, who has all of those great 70s countercultural anti-hero qualities that he can pull
Mhm.
out to deal with the bad guys. And I'm sure at some point everyone thinks he's the villain and he's responsible for this and that. And of course he's not.
Mhm.
And so they already kind of know who these characters are. And we're not dealing with Ibsen and Chekhov. They can be introduced in media race pretty easily with one line. Oh, Willie, I'm so glad you rescued me from that tomb, but you're a scamp. I don't trust you. Here's a cane. I'm going to beat you. Just keep in line. And, oh, Barnabas, I can't believe these other women. I'm a doctor. I'm going to try and carry you. It's really just in like 2 lines. You can explain most of the dynamic of the series and then move on, because what I'm thinking of
Mhm.
are, that your audience is largely kids
Mhm.
who followed this. And I'm sure there are lots of kids' birthday parties where they all got tickets to the new Dark Shadows movie because everybody loves the Viewmaster reels. And I'm not saying that it should have been a dumbed down kiddie movie.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that, but it could have used some George Powell.
Mhm.
I mean, if you can take Willy Wonka and turn it into a dark horror movie, you can take a dark horror story and cant it just enough that the audience who loved it would go on loving it. They came to the show, they came to the movie to see what they loved. They
To
didn't
see home. Yeah.
It's like No Time to Die. They didn't come to the movie to see James Bond die.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we don't go to the Avengers to see Captain America, whoever it was, Iron Man, die.
Right.
And it is almost like Dan got in a time machine and came to 2022 and said, oh, this is how you do it, and went back and killed everybody off. It's like, I'm sorry, Mr. Whedon, but you've got a few years before you're going to be running the show and killing everyone. So and it's so easy to just say, oh, but it's bold. Well, yeah, just because it's bold doesn't mean it's good, and it doesn't mean
It's
it's
right.
good
Yeah.
franchise. And we could have had Dark Shadows going through the 70s into the 80s and 90s if we hadn't had a franchise so monstrously mishandled. I don't know if I've ever seen a franchise more bungled than with this movie. And the worst part is, it's a good movie, So you can't get as angry as I get about it.
I understand. When you
Because,
love Dark Shadows as much as we do, it's like,
but
yeah.
but it's like, had I been a motion picture distributor who just 5 years before had given the top actor of the year, the top upcoming star of the year, to Adam West for Batman 66, part of a franchise, I would have gone to this expecting some Batman 66, not in tone, but that this is going to be a continuation, a cinematic version of what people love on a bigger scale. And they're going to love the series even more. And they're going to go back to more movies and more movies. And almost like Harry Potter, maybe the movies would have gotten more mature, a little racier as the 70s went on, as that was the sensibility of the 70s, and as their fan base grew up. So I cannot just sit back and say it's just a movie, because it really is an extension of what was time one of the most important franchises in entertainment. So,
Dan always did have this flavor of like hopelessness, though. Like,
like David Lee.
Burnt Offerings. It was hopeless. Everything he touches has that little bit of, because most horror movies like Hammer that I love, we all love, has the cross wins in the end, Christ wins in the end, the light overcomes the darkness, you know. But in Dan Curtis projects, there's like a hopelessness there,
I'm
and that
amazed
makes
the
it
Nazis
really
didn't win the
scary.
war. I'm amazed the Nazis didn't win in Winds of War with that attitude.
Well,
And let's make that hopeless too.
that's kind of his style, but I see what you mean. It's a disservice to the franchise in many ways. But what did you think overall of this?
I think too, there's a lot of things to take in consideration. Number one, this movie was filmed while the series was still going on, as Patrick pointed out in the first Dark Shadows book. And two, if you're going to take the actors from the series and make a movie, I mean, keep in mind there are movies that became series like MASH and Stargate later on, but you're not doing that here. You're taking a series that is red hot and turning it into a film. I watched it.
Yeah.
Jonathan Frid was on What's My Line when he was filming the movie. He was on there dressed as Barnabas, and they couldn't guess it was Jonathan Frid because he had the fangs in. And when they revealed when they took off the blindfolds, they asked him, well, he said about they were filming the movie up in Tarrytown, and they said, what's it going to be called? He said it's going to be called Dark Shadows. Now, the title got changed, obviously, a bit. But it makes you feel, he said what he loved most was a lot of the cast from the show were in the movie, so he was comfortable with everybody in the film. I always get the sense of, here's your opportunity to turn this series into a movie franchise.
Yeah.
And they
Wow.
Let me say this too. I don't feel they failed to do it because Jonathan Frid didn't want to play Barnabas anymore. I think they failed to do it because this movie really, you could tell right away that, from my standpoint, when I first watched this, because I watched this completely blind going in when I first watched this. I did not watch the trailer. I just wanted to watch it and see. I'd seen the series, but I wanted to watch it completely blind. I didn't want to watch a trailer. So when I watched it, I picked up one thing right away. And when I picked it up is when Fred is standing there presenting the jewels to Elizabeth, because Naomi wore them. I'm thinking they are going to kill off Barnabas in this movie. And I don't know why I thought that, but I was proven right.
Maybe
but
because it wasn't the Dark Shadows 2.
Right. And that's the thing too. It's like there wasn't the Dark Shadows 2 that we get is Night of Dark Shadows, which is a great film.
Yeah, it's really good.
Again, Dark Shadows hasn't become a movie franchise yet. I still think it can be. And one day I do think we will get that again.
Oh, I would love that.
In my opinion. What's your opinion, Butch?
Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, no, Butch, please.
What's the topic?
What's the topic?
Yeah. Could this have been a franchise? Yeah. I didn't. Quick question. Was this the first series, the movie? Because I used to think it was Star Trek, but I'm pretty...
9 years before Star Trek, the motion picture.
And...
Did Butch freeze?
Yeah.
He's holding in a sneeze.
And if I suddenly leave, I got 14%.
I had one guy on the internet.
Oh, we lost you for a minute, Butch.
I was going to say, what you could do is, I don't know, have a 20-30 minute part with Barnabas.
Yeah.
It's all the characters, Josette and all of them. And even if you never come back to Angelique in this movie, you've set her up.
Yeah.
And that, in my opinion, that would be how to build this as a franchise. Since you've already got a path with the series.
Yeah.
And then you call Patrick McCray and go, Patrick, who else do we need right there?
From the womb, I would have had coming. I don't remember what I was going to say. It was good though. It was something. It wasn't more ranting and raving.
I'm gonna borrow an idea that another friend of ours had. Mark Gilman had said about maybe the people who cursed Barnabas were the Cult of Judah Zachary members. And what if Barnabas, when he comes out of the coffin, he's not sure who's a cult member, so he starts killing off his own family, and that's why he's killing them. Right, and that's why he's killing them off, because he doesn't know who to trust, so he doesn't trust anybody. And right, so it's like, screw it. Like, I got locked in this coffin for over 200 years. You sons of bitches found someone stupid enough to let me out. Okay. And then he starts taking revenge. And then he starts looking.
Oops. Sorry, Liz.
Right. Yeah. And he does find the one person who's not is Willie. And he goes, why did you just kill your own family? He goes, the people who turned me, what you learn was Natalie. You could say it was Natalie too, Natalie Dupre. You never know. That's the thing. House of Dark Shadows, one of its best qualities was when Jonathan Fritz said, when they put this curse on me, because you didn't know who they were. You didn't know who they were. They were.
It's true. Guys, if I pal out, I just lost power. I didn't leave. So just so you know, I'll stay on until I drain. I will stay online until my battery drains. But yeah.
I was gonna say. I was gonna talk about.
Good night, everybody.
I was going to talk about the experience that I had when I saw the movie for the first time.
Good.
Which says a lot about the movie. I saw it not really knowing what I was going to be seeing. I saw it about midway into the Maggie kidnapping storyline. And there was no real media of any kind to look this stuff up in. And, you got a paragraph in Leonard Maltin's book. And by paragraph, I mean like a sentence. And that was it in trying to do research about this film. And all I had was the series. And I knew the series lasted for a while. And it had been about 11 years since the movie came out, which to me now is, nothing. But at that point, it was my entire life. And most of the audience had not seen it again. And most of the audience, even because of syndication and so on, which was not a right way to see this stuff, had only a very kind of vague memory. It's like, well, who's Quentin? Well, he was sometimes a werewolf. And, well, did he and Barnabas team up and fight crime together? So, well, maybe. I don't really remember. They had these, the occasional Marilyn Ross book that somebody found. But, that's about as representative of the series as a Gold Key comic book. So, I did, and this was a concentrated way that we could show people what Dark Shadows was. Hey, what's this thing you're watching every day at 4:30? I don't have time for that. It's like, you don't need time. We got a movie. Yeah. And so I saw it with about 900 people.
Wow.
At a movie theater in Louisville that had brought it back because the syndicated series in Louisville was successful enough. Rainy Saturday afternoon. It was perfect. And the audience was so excited. And they really didn't remember it that clearly because they hadn't seen it in 10 years. And when the opening credits played, there was applause in the theater.
What an experience.
It was. And then the movie happened to us.
Oh.
And when it was over, there were a few people trying to kind of do this, but there was a pall. There was this funereal pall of the audience. They walked out, and I thought, well, and in many ways, that's a metaphor for being a Dark Shadows fan. Is just this joy at seeing this amazing thing on the wing of the plane, only to have it, just not be there when you called the stewardess over to look. And
Great Twilight Zone episode.
that pall felt by 900 people, and you can feel the energy of an audience. I don't know how.
Yep.
It was I walked home. It was about 3 blocks away from the theater to the Charlie Brown Christmas theme. Just head sunk, and it's like, oh, that's my franchise.
Oh.
Well, I guess we've got a day book to write in 35 years. 40 years. I don't know.
See, sometimes blessings come out of disappointing things.
Right? But I would trade it.
Yeah, I know you would. I
would trade it.
Yeah. Now, Butch is somebody that you haven't watched the series a lot, just here and there.
It's perfect for you.
Yeah. What did you like? As somebody who hasn't watched the show extensively, like we all have, what you seem to maybe just appreciate it for what it is a little bit more, because you're not attached to the characters and to Collinwood as much as we are in a certain authentic way,
Maybe so, but I don't know if it's because I've known Patrick for over 20 years now, but I understand exactly what he's saying about this. I mean, if this was my introduction to Dark Shadows, I might be, there's some interesting stuff in this, but I don't know if, I don't know if there's enough here to really get me excited about it. I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a flawed masterpiece, but
you hit the nail on the head when you said it's like Count Yorga. Now, Count Yorga is a little bit more involved, I think. I think it's better. But a lot of the ambiance was like Yorga. Yeah.
Yeah, it has that feel, Kolchak feel, the later Hammer with, when they were like busting out the blood and
yeah.
2 little dots to gaping wounds and the blood flames.
Patrick's never seen Count Yorga or Return of Count Yorga. I keep telling him, you gotta watch it.
I thought we watched Yorga.
I know.
Return of Count Yorga is my favorite. They're great. Have you seen them, Joel?
We watched those Ritz Brothers movies.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Joel?
Here's a question.
Okay.
First of all, how many of you have seen both Stargate and Stargate SG-1?
I've seen Stargate SG-1.
Yeah, the series.
The sci-fi series, yeah. I've seen that.
Okay. In a
Have
way,
you seen it, Patrick?
No.
Butch can back this up for me. In a way, the series is sort of somewhat sequeling the movie. It's following it closely enough. Had Dark Shadows, the movie, had House of Dark Shadows did that with the series, Patrick, do you think it would have been different?
Run that by me again.
Okay. If House of Dark Shadows had tried to follow along the series, like sequeling the series, would Dark Shadows as a movie franchise be different?
Yes. Yeah, there's no question. All you have to do is take one of the many beloved, well-established villains from the series, specifically, you have Nicholas Blair, Angelique, or Count Tofi, who were not, who had been established, who'd been successes at that time, and make them the bad guys. They've come back from the grave with some horrible plan, and Barnabas have to stop them. that's your series. That's your movie, and you can almost make it a side quote. You know, I mean, imagine even if you want to, Barnabas goes into parallel time, but instead he winds up elsewhere.
Yeah.
And then you see the movie, and it's all these characters who are referred to in parallel time but don't show up, you know, because of, you know, they're in the western wing of the house or whatever. And it's a standalone movie. Yeah. Because maybe they don't even get into the parallel. They don't have time for that. Or, you know, something like that. I think it's definitely possible to have made this either fit into the series, like I'm checking a horse or something, like, you know, fit into the series or be a part of it. I mean, there's so many ways. There are so many ways. If all Dan had done is gone to Sam and Gordon and said, guys, you're bright fellas, make something that fits in and around the series, that that will give the audience the characters they love and allow us to build a franchise and build some amazing pools for ourselves for the next years.
Yeah.
Now, you want Matthew to go to a good college?
Yeah.
And we'll move the filming of the show eventually to Burbank, because that's where they're.
Ooh.
And I'll get one of the many great writers out there to be a showrunner with you, so I can hang back and be the, you know, executive, be the brains behind it. And Dark Shadows, you know, Roger Corman, you think you're good at this? Meet Dan Curtis. And I will make a Dark Shadows movie every once in a while, but then Collinwood Productions is going to take Sam Arkoff and Jack Nicholson, or James H. Nicholson, and Roger Corman, God bless all three of them, and send them home to mama.
Yeah.
That's the plan, guys.
Oh.
And I'm going to make my big art horror films
Yeah.
in 1973, 74, after we have this juggernaut. And Dark Shadows is going to keep going. It's going to keep going in Burbank. We're going to bring all the actors out there. Trust me, they would love it.
Oh, that would have been great.
Yeah, and this is not rocket surgery. This is not rocket science. This is, you know, we already had a Planet of the Apes franchise. We had franchises out the wazoo.
Yeah.
This was not that difficult to imagine. And so what you have to do is you almost have to sit back and wonder, why didn't they do this?
Yeah.
And that because
he could have made more money in the long run if it's about money.
They could have had a better franchise, and they could have given this amazing stable of actors a job every other year.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm sorry, but love Dan. I know it sounds like I don't, but I do. But
I understand.
he could have done a lot of good for a lot of people.
A lot of people.
And maybe for American pop culture. And that didn't happen. And it's not like I don't think I'm being Monday morning quarterback on this. Had there been none of these great franchises, had there been no, you know, million Tarzan movie, million Sherlock Holmes movie, no Hammer franchise, bring back Dracula and Frankenstein every few years, if none of those things existed, then I think this would be a big ask. I think I would be being unreasonable.
Right.
But all of those things did exist.
Yeah.
Well, there were.
That makes the question: why didn't he?
I think I have a theory.
Yeah.
Well, Jewel, I don't want to. Jewel, you're gonna throw something.
Well, what I was gonna say was to your franchise.
I'm gonna call you guys back in the car.
Okay, to your franchise, to Patrick's franchise point. One of the first franchises, like consistent franchise of movies that I watched, was The Whistler on Turner Classic Movies. They were a series of movies about one guy, about a guy that was witnessing crime, and so that was a franchise. And like you said, Sherlock Holmes. Look, the franchises were in existence long before DS was. So
Okay.
it's not like, and even Planet of the Apes, like you said, it was a franchise as well.
The
So it's
present.
not like, right, it's not like the franchises were unheard of from a film, from a movie standpoint.
Hmm?
That's what I think gets everybody as a DS fan. It's like they they needed to be thinking in a big franchise way about this series.
So you want my theory?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is just a theory, and I may tank daybook sales by saying any of these things. And I apologize if I make somebody upset. I genuinely do. Not being Jeff Thompson, not being an expert on Dan Curtis or any of that, and I'm probably saying things to be disproved 8 ways to Sunday. So I'm just really armchair on this. Is that you see something like Rosemary's Baby, which is an art horror film,
Yeah.
and you see it, sweep Hollywood, and suddenly the idea of horror, post Manson family horror, as a legitimate thing in cinema. This amazing political allegory of Night of the Living Dead. All these things exist. So Dan Curtis is looking at this and looking at the idea of being an artist and thinks this. I love horror movies. This is something I can do. Look, I have the beginning of a horror franchise.
Mhm.
And you also then are faced with, but to do that, I'm going to have to leave Dark Shadows because I can't really do both. If I leave Dark Shadows, what happens to my legacy if somebody comes along and does it better?
Yeah.
It's sort of like Gene Roddenberry having to deal with Harv Bennett, which hadn't happened yet. But I think enough things in entertainment probably had maybe happened that way, that's kind of a threatening thing when it's your baby. I mean, the two things you don't want for your baby is, one, for someone to treat it worse than you would, because then it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
And then the other is for someone to do it much better.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? But you create a controlled implosion, and you say goodbye to it in a way that you go, well, I just took risks. I didn't know. Gosh, oh my God, Dark Shadows. Oh well, that's a shame. But here's my card. And I'm not saying that happened
Right.
because I don't know.
Right.
But if I found out something like that did happen, it would not be outside of other stories I've heard coming from show business. It would not be outside of some of the jealousies I had seen and sometimes felt myself about, properties that I was, vaguely associated with here and there. It's because you just have to wonder. And beyond, well, he was a bold risk taker. He's always been, he decided to make a real scary horror movie and take legitimate risks. It's like, yeah, that's all true. But you're also sitting on a franchise with 20 million viewers a day. Does that? Well, begin to have to develop theories. And that is a dark theory. That is a theory I hope isn't true.
Yeah.
That is a theory I hope isn't true. But I don't know.
I think
It
I think
explains a lot.
I think too, with Dan Curtis, and again, this is my opinion as well, that I do think he came to a realization that this isn't going to last forever, meaning Dark Shadows. And did he want it to last forever? I don't know. I have no clue. But maybe he looked at it and went, I don't think this is going to last forever. And he did want to be, I mean, because before directing this movie, he did direct episodes of Dark Shadows.
Mhm.
So
Very good one. Very
yeah,
good one.
right. And so he rolls the dice and tries his hand at making a movie. The movie's very successful. You know, it's I think it's the highest grossing Dark Shadows movie still out of the three. But it,
Yeah, not a lot of competition in that. I mean,
yeah, that's true. That's
there
true.
are aquarium commercials that made more money than some of the Dark Shadows movies.
That's true. That's true. But you get my point. He was successful, and he
Yeah.
wanted. He did want a sequel. That movie, House of Dark Shadows. He didn't get the sequel that movie, but he did make Night of Dark Shadows, which I love. Uh, but
Great movie. Which
yeah,
makes it all even more complicated,
right.
because it's a great movie. But maybe to prove my point, you don't. If you didn't have the name Dark Shadows on it, and if you didn't have somebody named Collins
Yep.
in Collinwood, no one would have known.
Yep.
I mean, it's like Andor. It's like it's so little to do with the franchise and what at least I want from the franchise. But like Andor, it's really good.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
But I love Night of Dark Shadows. Night of Dark Shadows was a really refreshing movie when I finally saw it.
It was a
I was like,
masterpiece.
oh, this is really cool. It's like, Dan, if you're gonna take risks, just make maybe Dark Shadows becomes an anthology.
Yep.
And every year, like John Carpenter threatened to do with Halloween, it's a new movie with the name Dark Shadows set in and around a big spooky house, but it's somebody else. And we use the ensemble. And stating that as a mission statement, that becomes really cool.
Mm-hmm. It would have been really cool, and we don't get that, unfortunately. But no matter what, though, too, we're you and I, Melissa, we're big diehard fans of the series. The movies, House of Dark Shadows is a fun watch. I mean, I know it has its issues. Certainly, it's not it's not perfect.
But as a movie, it's a very entertaining,
Yep.
risky, dark, strange, kind of dark jazz riff on Dark Shadows.
I mean,
and that's cool.
it could be worse. It could
Yeah,
be.
I was so eager to get out of bed, I stepped on her face. But hello.
Hi. Sorry about that.
No,
I apologize.
Sorry about Jules' wedding night.
Jules, what did you do?
Oh my god!
After the tranquilizer,
YouTube won't let us talk about that again.
He did not take the horse tranquilizer voluntarily.
Oh, okay.
Well, you didn't, Jewel. You didn't. I keep telling you that.
It could be worse. It could have been a piece of shit shadow novel written by James Patterson. But look, it's an entertaining movie. It's a lot of fun. Is it perfect? No. But it's just a movie that you could sit back and watch and enjoy. I think that's the best part about it is with all three movies, again, none of them are canon to the series. So it's not like though this movie did affect the series in a way because it was being filmed while the series was going on, it didn't affect the series from a continuity standpoint.
You're right. Now, Jewel, I am the one
Very
with 2%
insightful.
pepper. So I will wink out of existence any moment.
Let me ask a quick question before you wink. If you're trying to get somebody that doesn't know anything about Dark Shadows to watch this film, I want all three of you to answer this, please. Patrick first. What would you tell them about this? How would you talk them into watching this film?
I would say it will familiarize you with sort of the very, very, very rough basics of the series. But imagine you see this, and now imagine you see this where he makes good decisions and winds up the hero. So if you like this and if that's interesting, imagine it where he becomes the hero, but he's just as much a badass and he fights even worse villains.
Yeah, I agree. Patrick, before you go, buddy, link to the Dark Shadows Daybook will be in the description box. Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. Go read it. I've been reading it on my channel. Patrick, it is always a pleasure, brother.
I love Dark Shadows, and anything I say about this movie is because I love Dark Shadows.
Yep, absolutely. We all love Dark Shadows. Butch, is there anything you want to add?
I can't add anything to what you three folks have said. I'll just say, yeah, what this person and this person and this person said. Listen to them. Don't listen to me.
Melissa?
Well, like I said at the beginning, these people are like a family. They're not a show. They're like my family because I just spent my whole life with them. And so when I show these movies to people, and I like the second one better, the Night of Dark Shadows, but this has Catherine and Nancy and Barnabas. It has everybody in it too that I love. So I would say you'll understand why I love these people, even though you're not getting the whole story. You will understand why they're family, because they're great actors. They're just mesmerizing on the screen. And at least we have the actor's legacy in this film. If we don't have anything else, we have their talent, we have part of their legacy, and we can appreciate them for who they are. Even maybe Dan Curtis didn't enough. The fans can. We can. They're very special. They would have went on to be big movie stars.
And Butch, to answer your question that you asked Patrick, I would just, to get people to watch this movie who have never seen the show, I would simply tell them that when you watch this movie, you're not necessarily watching the show, but watching the movie may get you to want to watch the show, because it something. When I had Will McKinley and Nancy Kersey on, they were talking about Jonathan Frakes because they worked for him. Will McKinley had said House of Dark Shadows did do that in its time, and so it probably could still do it today.
Yeah.
So that's
That's good. Patrick
I'm not sure if Patrick's really froze her.
Probably not. Did Catherine ever tell you anything about filming this movie? I don't know if he's pretending or not. It's hard to say.
I don't know. I know he had to go, so I'm not sure.
I can't tell.
But first of all, if Patrick can hear us, we're gonna sign off. But
Joel, let me throw something in that after listening to you guys, I will say this. This is kind of like Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Yeah,
it's the reverse, but if you were a fan of the original series and then when the motion picture came out, you got to check back in with your friends, like Melissa says, your family, your friends, see what they've been up to, and you get another adventure. This movie is much better than Star Trek: The Motionless Picture, but you have to, if you're a fan of the original series, you have to watch that movie at least once. Yeah. I'd say every Dark Shadows fan needs to watch this movie at least once. Or if you're interested in Dark Shadows, you should watch it at least once. Maybe watch it once, watch the series, then watch this or whatever. That's up to you. But
Barnabas unit.
Listen to me, you carbon unit. But
he's supposed to do Julia spanking.
But you kind of got to watch it at least once.
Butch, I have a question for you. Speaking of which, if you closed your eyes and you gave Grayson Hall DeForest Kelly's lines, and you gave DeForest Kelly Grayson Hall's lines, and you just closed your eyes, could you tell the difference? No.
I think eventually I could, but it would take a little while.
Dee's voice is a little higher. You're right.
And eventually the Southern accent kicks in with DeForest. Why, Captain Sir.
The idea of Grayson Hall playing a Southerner is about the funniest thing now I've ever thought.
I say, son. What we have here is a failure to communicate.
Well,
give me an award.
Well, wait. Tom Hiddleston did play Hank Williams Sr. in the movie.
Oh, interesting.
and Julia was a magnificent Loki.
Oh my god. Patrick, Melissa had a question for you.
Oh yeah, I wondered if Catherine, since you are, the creator of her beautiful website, Catherine Lee Scott, did
Yes.
she ever mention anything to you about the filming of the movies or this movie?
The amount of Dark Shadows shop we talk about when we talk
Yeah.
is in proportion to the amount of her career that Dark Shadows covered. I'm not going to, I mean, she's very, very, very fond of Dark Shadows. For the most part, the stuff that she and I talk about have to do with a lot of the contemporary projects that she's been working on. And I have always, to tell tales out of school or something, I guess, I've
But
always been really hesitant.
Dark Shadows is your heart, though,
Sure. I've always been very hesitant to fan out too much.
Yeah, right.
Because I try to keep it very, business-like.
Professional,
And
right.
yeah, if the subject of Dark Shadows comes up, sure, we talk about it. Just like if the subject of Jinxed or Down and Out Beverly Hills or something like that comes up.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just haven't wanted to exploit that either. Although she's answered any question I've asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, gals, is there anything you want to add before we get out of here?
It's an interesting movie, and I would watch it in concert with Night of Dark Shadows.
Yep.
And again, replace judgment with curiosity and just sit and say, well, why did they make it this way? And what positive things were they trying to accomplish by making it this way? What was the positive thing? Because it's easy for me to sit around and go, it should have been a franchise, but it wasn't. And so why is it the way it is? And what was Dan trying to do with it? And that's a positive way to get something out of the experience.
Yeah. Melissa?
Oh, just thank you for having me on again. I loved it and really enjoyed
you
guys and talking about our favorite thing.
Butch?
I think I hit my high point with the TNG, or excuse me, motionless picture comments. So I'm just going to go, yep.
Oh my god! First of all, you were all great. Patrick, Butch, Melissa, you're all great. And you all brought great insight as always. Thank you all three for joining me tonight and having the patience to put up with my nonsense. You guys have a great night.
Butch, thank you, Melissa.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye, Butch.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
You too. Bye.